Hare Krishna. So this is a continuation of the introduction of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, a condensed version of the life of Are you still there?
Yeah.
The life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Your screen here disappeared for a second. Let me see here. Okay. All right. The Lord extensively traveled all over the southern part of India. The great saint of Maharashtra, known as Saint Tukaram, was also initiated by the Lord. Saint Tukaram, after initiation by the Lord, flooded the whole of Maharashtra province with the Sankirtan movement, and the transcendental flow is still rolling on in the southwestern part of the great India peninsula. Go ahead.
The Lord excavated from South India two very important old literatures, namely the Brahma Samhita and Krishna Karnamrita. And these two valuable books are authorized studies for the person in the devotional line. The Lord then returned to Puri after his South Indian tour.
Yeah, the Brahma Samhita, I think there's only like part of one chapter, but that is such an unbelievable book. I mean, something written by Lord Brahma himself. It's like 150 trillion years old. I mean, just the time scales are just amazing in the Vedic tradition. On his return to Puri, all the anxious devotees of the Lord got back their life, and the Lord remained there with continued pastimes of his transcendental realization. Most important incident during that time. Okay, hold on. I think Alan's trying to join us here. Huh. He almost jumped in. Alan, you there?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
Pretty good. We're reading the third paragraph now. You can jump in after this one here. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, okay. All right. The most important incident during that time was his granting audience to King Prataparudra. King Prataparudra was a great devotee of the Lord, and he considered himself to be one of the servants of the Lord entrusted with sweeping the temple. This submissive attitude of the king was very much appreciated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The king requested both Bhattacharya and Roy to arrange his meeting with the Lord. However, when the Lord was petitioned by his two stalwart devotees, he flatly refused to grant the request, even though it was put forward by personal associates like Ramananda Roy and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. The Lord maintained that it is dangerous for a sannyasi to be in intimate touch with worldly, money-conscious men and with women. The Lord was an ideal sannyasi. No woman could approach the Lord even to offer respects. Women's seats were accommodated far away from the Lord. As an ideal teacher and acharya, he was very strict in his routine work of a sannyasi. Apart from being a divine incarnation, the Lord was an ideal character as a human being. His behavior with other persons was also above suspicion. In his dealing as acharya, he was harder than a thunderbolt and softer than a rose. One of his associates, Junior Haridas, committed a great mistake by lustfully glancing at a young woman. The Lord, as super soul, could detect this lust in the mind of Junior Haridas, who was at once banished from the Lord's association and was never accepted again, even though the Lord was implored to excuse Haridas for the mistake. Junior Haridas afterwards committed suicide due to his being disassociated from the company of the Lord, and the news of the suicide was duly related to the Lord. Even at that time, The Lord was not forgetful of the offense, and he said that Haridas had rightly met with the proper punishment. Go ahead, Al.
On the principles of the renounced order of life and discipline, the Lord knew no compromise, and therefore, even though he knew that the king was a great devotee, he refused to see the king only because the king was a dollar and cent man. By this example, the Lord wanted to emphasize the proper behavior for a transcendentalist. A transcendentalist has nothing to do with the money and with the women and money. He must always refrain from such intimate relations. The king was, however, favored by the Lord by the expert arrangement of the devotees. This means that the beloved devotee of the Lord can favor a neophyte more liberally than the Lord. Pure devotees, therefore, never commit an offense at the feet of another pure devotee. An offense at the lotus feet of the Lord is something excused by the merciful Lord. But an offense at the feet of the devotee is very dangerous for one who actually wants to make progress in devotional service.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
As long as the Lord remained at Puri, thousands of his devotees used to come to see him during the Rath Yatra car festival of Lord Jagannath. And during the car festival, the washing of the Gandhika temple under the direct supervision of the Lord was an important function. The Lord's congregational Sankirtan movement at Puri was a unique exhibition for the mass of people. That is the way to turn the mass mind towards spiritual realization. The Lord inaugurated this system of mass Sankirtan, and leaders of all countries can take advantage of this spiritual movement in order to keep the mass of people in a pure state of peace and friendship with one another. This is now the demand of the present human society all over the world.
After some time, the Lord again started on his tour toward northern India. He decided to visit Vrindavan and its neighboring places. He passed through the jungles of Jharkhand, Madhya Bharat, and all the wild animals also joined his Sankirtan movement. The wild tigers, elephants, bears, and deer all together accompanied the Lord, and the Lord accompanied them in Sankirtan. By this, he proved that by the propagation of the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting and glorifying the name of the Lord, even the wild animals can live in peace and friendship. And what to speak of men who are supposed to be civilized? No man in the world will refuse to join the Sankirtan movement, nor is the Lord's Sankirtan movement restricted to any caste, creed, color, or species. Here is direct evidence of his great mission. He even allowed wild animals to partake in his great movement. Actually, there's a picture of like the deer and the tigers. They're like embracing and putting their arms around each other and kissing. Of course, he can do that. We can't. You know, he can make the animals chant, but I wouldn't want to try that with the tiger. Go ahead.
On his way back from Vrindavan, he first came to Prayag. Is it Prayaga?
Prayag, yeah.
Prayag, where he met Rupa Goswami, along with his younger brother Anupama. Then he came down to Benares, excuse me. For 2 months, he instructed Sri Santana Goswami in the transcendental science. The instructions to Santana Goswami is in itself a long narration, and full presentation of the instruction will not be possible here. The main ideas are given as follows.
Go ahead, Mike.
Sanatan Goswami, formerly known as Sakara Malika, was in the cabinet service of the Bengal government under the regime of Nawab Hussain Shah. He decided to join with the Lord and thus retired from the service. On his way back to Vrindavan, when he reached Varanasi, the Lord became a guest of Sri Tapana Mishra in Chandrasekhar, assisted by a Maharashtra Brahmana. At that time, Varanasi was headed by a great sannyasi of the Mayavadi school named Sripada Prakasananda Saraswati. When the Lord was at Varanasi, Varanasi, the people in general became more attracted to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on account of his mass Sankirtan movement. Wherever he visited, especially the Vaishnava temple, thousands of pilgrims would follow him. Some were attracted by his bodily features, and others were attracted by his melodious songs glorifying the Lord.
The Mayavadi sannyasis designate themselves as Narayan. Varanasi is still overflooded with many Mayavadi sannyasis. Some people who saw the Lord in his Sankirtan party considered him to be actually Narayan, and this report reached the camp of the great sannyasi Prakashananda. But
One devotee Brahma
no,
who
this is
became in India.
India.
Sorry. In India, there is always a kind of spiritual rivalry between the how do you pronounce that?
Mayavad and Bhagavat schools.
And thus, when the news of the Lord reached Prakasandra, he knew the Lord was a Vaishnava sannyasi, and therefore he minimized the value of the Lord before thus who brought him the news. He deprecated the activities of the Lord because of his preaching the Sankirtan movement, which was, in his opinion, nothing but religious sentiment. Prakash was a profound student of the Vedanta, and he advised his followers to give attention to the Vedanta and not to indulge in Sankirtan.
Mike.
One devotee Brahmana who became a devotee of the Lord did not like the criticism of Prakashananda, and he went to the Lord to express his regrets. He told the Lord that when he uttered the Lord's name before the sannyasi Prakashananda, the latter strongly criticized the Lord, although the Brahmana heard Prakashananda uttering several times the name Chaitanya. The Brahmana was astonished to see that the sannyasi Prakashananda could not vibrate the sound Krishna even once, although he uttered the name Chaitanya several times.
The Lord smilingly explained to the devotee Brahmana why the Mayavadi cannot utter the name of Krishna. Quote, the Mayavadis are offenders at the lotus feet of Krishna. Although they utter always Brahma, Atma, or Chaitanya, etc. And because they are offenders at the lotus feet of Krishna, they're actually unable to utter the holy name of Krishna. The name Krishna and the personality of Godhead Krishna are identical. There's no difference in the absolute realm between the name, form, or person of the absolute truth, because in the absolute realm, everything is transcendental bliss. There is no difference between the body and soul for the personality of Godhead Krishna. He is different from the living entity who is always different from his outward body. Because of Krishna's transcendental position, it is very difficult for a layman to actually know the personality of Godhead Krishna, his holy name and fame, etc. His name, form, fame, form, and pastimes are all one and the same transcendental identity, and they are not knowable by the exercise of the material senses. Go ahead, Mike. Or I mean, Al, I guess Mike, yeah.
No, it's my turn.
That's your turn.
The transcendental relationship of the pastimes of the Lord is a source of the still more bliss than one can experience by realization of Brahman or by becoming one with the Supreme. Had it not been seen so, then those who are already situated in the transcendental bliss of Brahman, who would not have been attracted to the transcendental bliss of the pastimes of the Lord.
After this, a great meeting was arranged by the devotees of the Lord, in which all the sannyasis were invited, including the Lord and Prakashananda Sarasvati. In this meeting, both the scholars, the Lord and Prakashananda, had a long discourse on the spiritual values of the Sankirtan movement, and a summary is given below.
You know, the amazing thing about that pastime is the way that the Lord introduced himself to those sannyasis. He sat in the boot room where the people wash their feet. And it's like a filthy place, you know, but he his effulgence was so bright that the sannyasis were like attracted to him, and they let him in. And they actually asked, well, I can't be with you guys. You guys are so exalted. I can't associate with you. I'm just one of these lesser sannyasis, but so through his humility, he actually won their hearts. He melted their hearts. He's so humble. That's the quality of a real devotee, is he can melt people's hearts by his humility. The great Mayavad sannyasi Prakashananda inquired from the Lord as to the reason for his preferring the Sankirtan movement to the study of Vedanta Sutra. Prakashananda said that it is the duty of a sannyasi to read the Vedanta Sutra. What caused the Lord to indulge in Sankirtan? Go ahead, Al.
After this, the inquiry, the Lord submissively replied, I have taken to the Sankirtan movement instead of the study of the Vedanta because I am a great fool. The Lord thus represented himself as one of the numberless fools of this age who are absolutely incapable of studying the Vedanta philosophy. The fool's indulgence in the study of the Vedanta has caused so much havoc in society. The Lord thus continued, and because I am a great fool, my spiritual master forbade me to play with Vedanta philosophy. He said that it is better that I chant the holy name of the Lord, for that would deliver me from material bondage.
In this age of Kali, there is no other religion but the glorification of the Lord by utterance of his holy name, and that is the injunction of all the revealed scriptures. My spiritual masters taught me one shloka from the Brahman Naridya Purana. Harinama, Harinama, Harinamaiva Kevalam, Kalinaste Eva Naste Eva Naste Eva Gatiranyata. So, on the order of my spiritual master, I chant the holy name of Hari, and now I am mad after this holy name. Whenever I utter the holy name, I forget myself completely, and sometimes I laugh, cry, and dance like a madman. I thought that I had actually gone mad by this process of chanting, and therefore I asked my spiritual master about it. He informed me that this was the real effect of chanting the holy name, which produces a transcendental emotion that is a rare manifestation. It is the sign of love of God, which is the ultimate end of life. Love of God is transcendental to liberation, mukti, and thus it is called the fifth stage of spiritual realization, above the stage of liberation. By chanting the holy name of Krishna, one attains the stage of love of God. And it was good that fortunately I was favored with the blessing.
So who was Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master? Do you know? Anybody? His name was Ishvara Puri. He was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri, who was actually the link to our sampradaya into the nectar of Madhurya Ras, because he was able to relish that and experience it himself. And then when Lord Chaitanya actually took initiation by Ishvara Puri, he went to Gaya and he took an initiation from him, and that at that point he started exhibiting all these symptoms. Before, he wouldn't exhibit any of these transcendental symptoms. He was kind of like hidden. But after he got initiated, he wanted to show that, so he actually started manifesting those transcendental symptoms, like his, start laughing, crying, dancing like a madman. Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay. On hearing this statement from the Lord, the Mayavadi sannyasi asked the Lord, what was the harm in studying the Vedanta along with chanting the holy name? Prakashananda Saraswati knew well that the Lord was formerly known as Nimai Pandit, a very learned scholar of Navadip, and his posing as a great fool was certainly for some purpose. Hearing this inquiry by the sannyasi, the Lord smiled and said, quote, my dear sir, if you do not mind, I will answer your inquiry, end quote. Go ahead, Al.
All the sannyasis there were very much pleased with the Lord for his honest dealings, and they unanimously replied that they would not be offended by whatever he replied. The Lord then spoke as follows. The Vedanta Sutra consists of transcendental words of sounds uttered by the transcendental personality of Godhead. As such, in the Vedanta, there cannot be any human deficiencies like mistakes, illusions, cheating, or inefficiency. The message of the Upanishads is expressed in the Vedanta Sutra and is what excuse me, and what is said that there is directly is certainly glorified. Whatever interpretations have been given by Sank, how do you pronounce that word?
Shankaracharya.
Have no direct bearing of the sutra, and therefore such commentation spoils everything.
The
Go ahead,
word
Mike.
Brahman indicates the greatest of all, which is full with transcendental opulences, superior to all. Brahman is ultimately the personality of Godhead, and he is covered by indirect interpretations and established as impersonal. Everything that is in the spiritual world is full of transcendental bliss, including the form, body, place, and paraphernalia of the Lord. All are eternally cognizant and blissful. It is not the fault of the Acharya Shankara that he has so interpreted Vedanta, but if someone accepts it, then he certainly is doomed. Anyone who accepts the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead as something mundane certainly commits the greatest blasphemy.
Thus, the Lord spoke to the sannyasi almost in the same way that he spoke to the Bhattacharya in Puri, and by forceful arguments, he nullified the Mayavad interpretations of the Vedanta Sutra. All the sannyasis there claimed that the Lord was the personified Vedas and the personality of Godhead. All the sannyasis were converted to the cult of bhakti. All of them accepted the holy name of Lord Sri Krishna, and they dined together with the Lord in the midst of them. After this conversion of the sannyasis, the popularity of the Lord increased at Varanasi, and thousands of people assembled to see the Lord in person. The Lord thus established the primary importance of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Dharma, and he defeated all other systems of spiritualization. After that, everyone in Varanasi was overwhelmed with the transcendental Sankirtan movement. Go ahead now.
While the Lord was camping at Varanasi, Sanatana Goswami also arrived after retiring from office. He was formerly one of the state ministers in the government of Bengal. Then, under the regime of Nawab Hussain Shah, he had some difficulty in getting relief from the state service, for the Nawab was reluctant to let him leave. Nonetheless, he came to Varanasi, and the Lord taught him the principles of devotional service. He taught him about the constitutional positions of the living being, the cause of the bondage under material conditions, his eternal relation with the personality of Godhead, the transcendental position of the supreme personality of Godhead, his expansions in the different plenary portions of incarnations, his control of different parts of the universe, the nature of his transcendental abode, devotional activities, their different stages of development, the rules and regulations for achieving the gradual stages of spiritual perfection, the symptoms of different incarnations in different ages, and how to detect them with reference to the context of revealed scriptures.
Yeah, he taught him so much. I mean, that's a whole chapter in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But the way that that Sanatana Goswami approached Lord Chaitanya is that people say that I'm a great scholar. I don't know anything. I don't even know who I am. Please tell me who I am and what is the goal of life. And Lord Chaitanya instructed him. The Lord's teachings to Sanatana Goswami form a big chapter in the text of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and to explain the whole teachings in minute details would require a volume in itself. These are treated in detail in our book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya.
At Mathura, the Lord visited all the important places. Then he reached Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya appeared in the family of high caste Brahmana, and over and above that, as a sannyasi, he was the preceptor for all the varnas and ashrams. But he used to accept meals from all classes of Vaishnavas. At Mathura, the Sanadiya Brahmanas are considered to be in the lower status of society, but the Lord accepted meals in the family of such a Brahmana also because his host happened to be the disciple of Madhavendra Puri family.
Go ahead.
At Vrindavan, the Lord took bath in 24 important bathing places, or dāsas. He traveled to all the 12 important vainas, which are forests. In these forests, all the cows and birds welcomed them. As if he were their very old friend, the Lord has began to embrace all the trees of these forests, and by doing so, he felt the symptoms of transcendental ecstasy. Sometimes he feels unconscious, but he has made to regain consciousness by the chanting of the holy name of Krishna. The transcendental symptoms that were visible on the body of the Lord during his travel within the forest of the Vrindavan were all unique and inexplicable, and we have to just give into the synopsis only.
Some of the important places that were visited by the Lord in Vrindavan were Kamyavan, Adishwar, Pavana Sarovara, Gandhiravan, Sheshashayi, Kali Tirtha, Bandiravan, Bhadravan, Shrivan, Lolavan, Mahavan, Gokula, Kaliyahrada, Dvada Saditya, Keshi Tirtha, etc. When he saw the place where the rasa dance took place, he at once fell down in trance. As long as he remained in Vrindavan, he made his headquarters at Akrura Ghat. Go ahead, Mike.
From Vrindavan, his personal servitor, Krishnadas Vripra, induced him to go back to Prayag to take bath during the Magha Mela. The Lord acceded to this proposal, and they started for Prayag. On the way, they met with some Partans, among whom there was a learned Mulana. The Lord had some talks with the Mulana and his companions, and the Lord convinced the Mulana that in the Quran also there are descriptions of Bhagavat Dharma and Krishna. All the Patans were converted to his cult of devotional service.
When he returned to Prague, Srila Rupa Goswami and his youngest brother met him near Bindu Madhava temple. This time the Lord was welcomed by the people of Prayag more respectively. How do you pronounce that name?
The Lord respectfully.
No, that where it says Vala, it says begins with a V.
Vallabhabhata.
Yeah. Who resided on the other bank of the Prague on the village of the Adaya, excuse me, was to receive him at his place. But while going there, the Lord jumped in the river of the Yamuna. With great difficulty, he was picked up in an unconscious state. Finally, he visited the headquarters of the
Vallabhabhata.
The Vallabhata was one of his chief admirers, but later on he inaugurated his own party, the Vallabha Sampradaya.
Right. On the bank of the Dashvamedha Ghat. Oh, is this your turn, Michael?
I'm not sure. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, go ahead. I think it's your turn.
Okay. On the bank of the Dashvamedha Ghat at Prayag for 10 days continually, the Lord instructed Rupa Goswami in the science of devotional service to the Lord. He taught the Goswami the divisions of the living creatures in the 8,400,000 species of life. Then he taught him about the human species. Out of them, he discussed the followers of the Vedic principles, out of them, the fruit of workers, out of them, the empiric philosophers, and out of them, the liberated souls. He said that there are only a few who are actually pure devotees of Lord Sri Krishna.
Srila Rupa Goswami was the younger brother of Sanatana Goswami, and when he retired from service, he brought with him 2 boatfuls of gold coins. This means that he brought with him some hundreds of thousands of rupees accumulated by the labor of his service. Before leaving home for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he divided the wealth as follows: 50% for the service of the Lord and his devotees, 25% for relatives, and 25% 100% for his personal needs in case of emergency. And that way he set an example for all householders. What now?
The Lord taught the Goswami about devotional service, comparing it to a creeper, and advised him to protect the bhakti creeper most carefully against the mad elephant, offense against the pure devotee. In addition, the creeper has to be protected from the desires of sense enjoyment, monistic liberation, and the perfection of the Hatha Yoga system. They are all detrimental on the path of devotional service. Similarly, violence against living beings and desires for worldly gain, worldly reception, and worldly fame are all detrimental to the progress of bhakti and the Bhagavad Dharma.
Pure devotional service must be freed from all desires for sense gratification, fruit of aspirations, and culture of monistic knowledge. One must be freed from all kinds of designations, and when one is thus converted to transcendental purity, one can then serve the Lord by purified senses.
As long as there is the desire to enjoy sensually, or to become one with the Supreme, or to possess the mystic powers, there is no question of attaining the stage of pure devotional service.
Devotional service is conducted under two categories, namely primarily practice and spontaneous emotion. When one can arise to the platform of spontaneous emotion, he can make further progress by spiritual attachment, feeling, love, and many higher stages of devotional life, for which there are no English words. We have tried to explain the science of devotional service in our book, The Nectar of Devotion, based on the authority of Bhakti Prasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami.
You can read, why don't you read all of those?
Yeah, I'll read them. Transcendental devotional service has 5 stages of reciprocation. The first is the self-realization stage just after liberation from material bondage, is called the Santa or neutral stage. 2, after that, when there is a development of transcendental knowledge of the Lord's internal opulences, the devotee engages himself in the dāsa stage. 3, by the further development of the dāsa stage, a respectful fraternity with the Lord develops, and above that, a feeling of the friendship on equal terms becomes manifest. But these stages are called the Sayak stage, or devotional service and friendship. 4, above this is the stage of parental affection toward the Lord, and this is called the Vasila stage. 5, and above this is the stage of conjugal love, and the stage is called the highest stage of the love of God. Although there is no difference in the quantity in any of the above stage, the last stage of the conjugal love of God is called the
Madhurya
stage.
Madhurya stage, right?
Yeah.
We're going to read up to the Śikṣāṣtaka verses, and then we'll start next week on that, because we only got 2 minutes left there.
Sure.
Go ahead and read the last paragraph, Michael.
Well, the last two there. Okay.
Up to the Śikṣāṣtaka prayers.
Thus he instructed Rupa Goswami in the devotional science and deputed him to Vrindavan to excavate the lost sites of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. After this, the Lord returned to Varanasi and delivered the sannyasis and instructed the elder brother of Rupa Goswami. We have already discussed this. The Lord left only 8 shlokas of his instructions in writing, and they are known as the Śikṣāṣtaka. All other literatures of his divine cult were extensively written by the Lord's principal followers, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan and their followers. The cult of Chaitanya philosophy is richer than any other, and it is admitted to be the living religion of the day, with the potency for spreading as Vishvadharma, or universal religion. We are glad that the matter has been taken up by some enthusiastic sages like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj and his disciples. We shall eagerly wait for the happy days of Bhagavat Dharma and Prema Dharma, inaugurated by the Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Jai. I think this is the last part. That's it. You know, we'll begin with the Śikṣāṣtaka prayers, because those are kind of important.
Yeah.
I mean, they're most important because it's the only thing that Lord Chaitanya wrote. Anyway, thank everybody for attending. I thought that Devananda Pandit was going to join us because he said, I thought I would try today, just got back home, but I guess he wasn't able to get on, but maybe next week. Anyway, thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Have a wonderful rest of your week. Hare
Bye,
Krishna.
Śikṣāṣtaka.